Hello YouTube, Pat the Sound Guy here. Do you have one of these little generators that the carburetor leaks like crazy? Well, stay tuned, we'll show you how to fix it. Here we go. If you like these videos and want to see more, please remember to subscribe and give a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. I'm at the point where I'm got 600 subscribers and climbing. I think it's 609? 604. Well, it's pretty close there. I've got this little two-stroke generator here. These are very popular from places like Harbour Freight in the United States, and we get them from a place called King Tools here in Canada. You see them here and there. I got this guy for 50 bucks several years ago, and it was crusty in the carburetor because they left the fuel in it. Of course, it went like bubblegum. So I managed to get the carburetor cleaned out years ago. You can see just a little bit of remnants of the bubblegum goo left over from the evaporated junk from the ethanol and the fuel. And this float valve, needle valve, focus, there we go, was jammed in there and stuck like crazy. And it was really hard to get out. So what I had to do is I had to soak it for quite a long time to get that to free up. I use Simple Green for pressure washers for soaking that stuff, and usually these needles will come out. I did one of these a couple years ago for a customer, one of these machines that they had gotten for free. Someone gave them, and it was the same idea. It was really stuck in there. So I soaked it for a couple of hours, and that needle come right out because someone had already tried to work on that one, and, well, chowdered up the needle pretty good. So I managed to make a new needle valve out of another carb kit. So these little carb kits, that's an Oregon version, but it's for a Marlboro carburetor. You know, like something like your chainsaw, your trimmer, or whatever sort of thing. And they come with two different needle valves in there. See if I can find the needle valve for this one, the big one we're looking for, in a little plastic package inside. So there's a small one and a large one. And it turns out that large one right there, you can take that and replace the needle in this carburetor with it by a little bit of filing and work with a Dremel or a rotary tool, similar kind of thing. And you can trim this length on this to make that fit in one of those carbs and make that like new. And I may make one of those needles, but I might just try and work with the needle I got. So what happens is the bottom of that seat and inside of this seat gets covered in junk, and it gets a buildup of whatever. Sometimes there's corrosion even builds up in there. This one's still a little cruddy. So we're going to show you how to fix that. So we got a cotton swab here. I got 3 of them, but probably only need 1 or maybe 2. But all you got to do is cut this guy in half. So take a pair of scissors, my crocodile scissors out of my everyday carry here, and you cut this little sucker in half. And see if that's going to reach. Nope, might take one and cut it off at the very, very end to make that reach. Boop, boop, doop. Stick it in the drill. And it's funny, you know, I rarely ever have to replace a needle in carburetors. You know, it's usually how it works for me, because I do this a lot. Especially you got carburetors where you can't find a replacement, and it just leaks like crazy. I did this on a brand new generator a year or so ago for a buddy of mine servicing his car. He's got a Yanmar generator, expensive one. And had a carburetor that was a Honda clone, basically. And that needle and seat wouldn't seat worth a darn. I had to do this, I don't know how many times. So what you need yourself is a little bit of, Silvo, Brasso, mag wheel polish, anything like that will do. Even toothpaste. I've done it with toothpaste. It works just fine. The cheaper, the grittier the toothpaste, the better. But I've shook this up real well. And all you need is a bunch of this onto the end of that. So whatever's in the cap probably going to work. Now you've probably seen various guys in videos use the cotton swab to polish up that seat, but they never use the metal polish. Now I can't take full credit for this metal polish idea on the cotton swab. This came from a fellow board member on, there you go. So what you want to do, fellow board member from HondaSpree.net, where I am a moderator. Because the Honda Spree carburetors have a integral seat that's not replaceable. Look at that. And he showed how to do this, and I've been doing it ever since for many, many years. And that just polished that in there pretty darn good. And what also this does is polishes the barrel of that seat really, really well. You might be able to just take that by hand and just make sure that's clean on the walls of that. And see all the crud come off of that. Because sometimes what happens is these needles get hung up, or will hang up inside that because the clearances is all taken up by crud and buildup, corrosion, what have you. And so the walls of it, they're just not large enough. Just like maybe a thousandth or something, very tiny. Very little amount of space that's needed to make that valve move up and down. I can see that's pretty shiny in there now. We'll take another one and we'll just kind of use the remnants of whatever's left of that polish, and won't go right down deep in that. We'll just buff the walls of that a little better. Now the needle is pretty chowdered on the end of it where it goes up towards the float. But we'll deal with that in a minute. There we go. Yeah, like glass in there now. Oh yeah, that's what we're looking for. So take whatever, brake cleaner or carb cleaner. You know, sometimes brake cleaner doesn't work the best, but sometimes it works really well. But the brake cleaner, I find, is cheaper and more plentiful in the can. So a little bit of that. Make sure we get all of that residue out of there from that polish. You don't want that getting in and wearing the end of that rubber needle tip out. A little bit of compressed air. And ta-da! Let's see if we can get that a little bit better shielded in there. We can see if we can focus on that. You can see how shiny that is in there now. It's shiny down below where that needle's supposed to sit. Where's our Mr. Needle here? Blow that off a little compressed air. Okay, the tip of that needle is actually in great shape. These things are very hardy. You know, sometimes people think they can be delicate, but usually not that bad. Let's see if we can get this to focus for you. Focus. Focus, please. There it goes. So it's not too bad. So you see this had a little spot for a little clip that holds it to the float, which is still here, but it doesn't stay on very well because this is all chowdered up on the end. So there's a little bit of that lip missing. That's supposed to clip on there like that, but we're not going to worry about that because let's toss that back in the bin over here. Just gets in the way. Now, previously, several years ago, what I had done is I had adjusted the tab on the float. Of course, didn't have my heat gun at the time, so I just got the lighter in there and heated that up a little bit and bent that tab up to see if I could get it to be the right level. But, of course, my luck, that's not the right level. So we'll put this back together. We'll put that needle in there. Gently toss that in there. See, that's nicely falling out. So that's what we want. We want that. Sometimes you got to scrub the sides of that needle valve clean, a little bit of Scotch-Brite or a little fine sandpaper like 1000 grade or something like that. Polish it up real nice to make that slide really well in that seat. We pop this back on here. Let's find our pin. Put that back in there now. And you see that float is not sitting level. We want that float probably to be about there, level, or a little bit higher. Not too high, because you still want it to get fuel when it's supposed to. So what the name of the game is, I need to get my heat gun out we'll go dig the heat gun out and we'll see if we can get that tab bent down a little further to push that down there. Because if you blow in this, don't do what I do. Use a nice clean piece of fuel line for that. I just blow in that, make sure it seats. That's what you do. You take the carburetor upside down, and if that weight of that carburetor float sits on that needle and holds that needle shut, all you need is the weight of that float. And if you blow in that, and no air passes, you know you got a good seal, and you can blow as hard as you want, and as long that should stay sealed. So what we're gonna do, I'll go grab the heat gun, and I'll come back, and we will try and heat that tab up without mangling that float too bad, and just raise that up a hair. So I'll go grab that, grab a cable, power cable, and we will come back. I got my heat gun here, got it powered up, and I grabbed one of these pony clamps here. We can have a little pair of pliers and heat that little tab up there and see if we can get that to come and bend up just a little bit. Just a little bit. So let's see if we can heat that gently without melting it. So I bent it a lot, just to be on the safe side. And then when I got it to stay a little bit, I sprayed it with the brake clean because it's cold, and I have non-flammable brake clean, so that's not a problem. I'm not going to catch myself and blow myself up here. That's a good idea, not to blow yourself up. That's a good rule of thumb. Safety third. All right, so put our little needle in there. Let's just see how much I overdid it. Or as I say, how much I overcooked it. Always adjust it a little more. It's not a big deal. I'll put that back together. Molten plastic smell. Isn't it wonderful? I think I overcooked it. I think I really overcooked it. So that's not what you want. So let's just lightly heat that a hair again and split the difference. Is the idea here. Do 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 do. I think if I just make that tab, what do you think? Make that tab go flatter that way so it's on that full angle that's at the back of it. I think we'll have it. Okay. I think we got it. We got that now, I think. We got that now. Let's try it. Cooled her off again. A little needle valve jiggles in there just nice. Okay. Put Mr. Needle in there. In goes the needle through the hole. I would say that might be it. Maybe a little lower. Just a hair lower. I did years ago find a source for parts for these little guys, but I didn't want to wait a gazillion years for it to show up in the mail, because here in Canada, you can try and order stuff from the United States or China. It can take a long time, and I don't like that. So I figured out how to fix it without buying parts. Unless it's for a customer that if I can't get parts, then I'll make something. Or if I can get parts and it's something I should buy parts, well, I order parts from my suppliers for that. But oh yeah, drop it. Got the case of the dropsies. Case of the burnsies. A week and a half ago, I burnt the heck out of my finger. Had one of my tractors up the road, and one of the pulleys seized up. And me being a dumbass, grabbed a hold of it to see if it would move. Well, yeah. I think that's about it. I can just push on that a little bit to get that to sit right. I'd call that close enough for rock and roll. Now that we've got this little carburetor fixed, or hope we have it fixed, I'm going to reassemble the little guy. I'm very careful not to kill this gasket for that float bolt nut, screw, fastener, what have you. Little rubber gasket. Sure, if I did kill it, then I could make a gasket from a Tecumseh or Briggs & Stratton gasket, which I have quite a few of. And by putting this back together, I'm sure you'll be able to figure out how it came apart. Because it's just everything in reverse, so it should be no problem. Now the only thing we want to do is that needle is hanging up again. So what we want to do is we're just going to double check it before we put it back together. I'm going to double check, make sure this is right before we put it back together. We might just take that needle a little bit. Make sure those surfaces are smooth. Maybe we'll take a little bit of this polish and just lightly polish this needle, or maybe hit it with a small light file or some sandpaper or something like that. You hold on a sec, I'm going to grab some sandpaper. Alright, got some 1000 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to be careful not to hit the rubber tip of the needle, of course. I am just going to try and hold out a little bit. And we are just going to try and hold out a little bit. I'm just going to polish those. This is 1000 grit. Lightly polish the sides of that. Or sometimes having a little bit of fingernail going on can be helpful. Now, another reason why I like to use the brake clean sometimes is that brake clean isn't as hard on the rubber parts as the carburetor is. That's very important with carburetors, where you want to try and keep some of the O-rings or rubber parts intact. It doesn't eat them up as bad. So let's try that again. So I got this fuel line put on there. So just slid it over, pop that on there. So you just pop this spring and this governor arm in this hole here with that little rubber gromity-doo, and we just put 2 bolts in it. And this comes through the hole, the choke comes through the hole there. So it's pretty simple to take apart. You can see by putting it back together. We'll just line those holes up with the carburetor. Might take a little moving it back and forth, but and kind of line them up, push them through, then push that choke lever through its little hole. There's not much to these things. They're pretty simplified. It's almost like a little mini scooter engine is what it is. I think it was worth my $50, even though I haven't really used it much, if at all. But we have a hurricane coming, basically tomorrow. So I want to be able to run some stuff. My socket handle, and we'll just finish those off by hand. Oop. Don't need too many ooga-choogas for that. Oh, look at that. We got a wire puff off down here. See where that come from. Now we've got so I got a nut that was a spacer, because it was kind of thing. It was supposed to have a spacer here, I think, but it, didn't have one. So I made one of a larger nut from behind here. And this screw goes in here, through that, into the chassis. So that little nut is a spacer. Well, it had a spacer to begin with, but it was certainly like it was missing one when I got it. So little hole in the chassis back here. So this screw went through and it just didn't sit right. So I just found this nut and it seemed to be the right length for a spacer. One of my plans for this little generator is to make a little plate for the side and a little pole for it, and find the plug that goes in this 12-volt socket here. I believe I can get those locally at Princess Auto. And I want to make a little pole with a couple of those LED lights, off-road kind of lights, on a short little lightweight little pole on the top, so this generator would be the base for it. And when you want work lights, when you're setting up a PA system outside, or tearing one down, or working in an emergency sort of situation, you want lots of light, to make one of those. A gas-powered work light. So you got power plug in here, and then you have your work lights right off of this. Because 10 amps is tons for a set of those work lights, because they take like 1 amp or something like that. So you can run a lot of lights off of something like that. And we'll put our little filter media in there. I believe it looks like it came this way. That come out of there. This comes off of here. That went in like that. So this guy goes here, because the air comes in here, goes through this little hole in here. So now we have it all back together. Here's our fuel petcock, our fuel shut-off. I'm going to turn it on and let this sit for a minute and see if it leaks or not. So we'll sit it for a minute, and we'll come back to you. All right. See how we go. Choke on. Ignition on. A little recap here of what we've done so far. So we've got the carburetor fix. It starts no problem. And it's been sitting for a minute or so here, shut off. And it's not leaking fuel. This is a good sign. Before it ran very, very poorly because it was flooding out the carburetor with fuel overloading that bowl. And it was trying to burn too much fuel. And it ran so rich, it just ran so poorly that it just, it was useless. So now I can actually run this grinder here. And that says it takes 5 amps. So that's not bad. I got the governor adjusted. There's a screw right underneath here. A little screw there. And it adjusts the governor. That sets how the RPM's the engine. So the speed of the engine. And I got it set to, it says it's rated voltage, 110 volts inside of it. And I got it set to about 115 with my meter here, so that should be good. A little bit of extra voltage won't hurt that much. It's just enough to, if you put a little bit of a load on it, it's got a little bit of extra in reserve, so it's probably hovering around 110 volts when you load it down. So I call that a win. Well, there you have it. Another one fixed. So next time you have a carburetor leak a whole bunch of fuel, give this a try, see how it goes. You might just fix it. Remember, thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and we'll see you on the next one.